Hello, Comic-Con. I am Daniel Pickett of Action Figure Insider. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're all still stuck at home, but fortunately, we're still finding ways of communing together in our nerdiness, and they have provided this excellent platform where we can keep doing these sorts of panels and getting together and talking about things and discussing all the stuff that we still love. And I couldn't be happier about that because it's been a wild year, a lot of ups, a lot of downs. um, so I've been doing these panels for Comic-Con for roughly 20 years, and I'm always trying to look at sort of different ways to approach talking about the action figure industry and collectibles and that sort of thing. And it occurred to me I'd never really done this topic before. I'm calling it Toy Presidents, talking to the guys in charge, the people where the buck stops with. And I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk about who they are, their backstory, kind of how they handle things. We've got a great lineup of guys that have come at this from a lot of different ways and different stories, and I think that will be very interesting to see because in the 20 years of doing this, so much of the time I get asked about how do you get into this industry, and if you ask 100 people in the industry, you will get 100 different stories. And so I just wanted to kind of talk about the guys at the top, like how that happened. I think that there's some there'll be some unexpected stories in here. So without further ado, I am going to let these gentlemen introduce themselves, where they are located, and the company that they are with, and maybe talk a little bit about what they do, because I know you've got a couple of different angles and lots of different properties and things. So we will start alphabetically by first name. We'll start with Andrew.
Oh, thanks so much, mate. Thanks also for explaining what the topic of the panel was, because until you said that, I didn't know. So that's highly illuminating. So mate, I'm the EVP of Titan Entertainment. Titan Entertainment is a global entertainment creative IP company that's based in London. It's existed for about 40 years, and it has 4 primary divisions. Forbidden Planet, which is a very well-known retail chain in the UK and Europe. So essentially, if you crossbred like Hot Topic with Midtown Comics, you'd kind of get Forbidden Planet. But Forbidden Planet really comes from a hardcore comic space, although it's evolved to be so much more than that now. And the flagship store in the central London, it's the biggest cult store in the world. And then we've got three primary divisions. Titan Books, which has existed for about 38 years, and there's several things we do at Titan Books. We produce highly collectible coffee table books for computer games, for anime, primarily for movies and TV shows. So for example, any Zack Snyder movie, we do the art of book for that movie. We do the art of books for a lot of Christopher Nolan movies. We do the art of books for all of the J.J. Abrams movies. We own a bunch of fiction lists. We produce a lot of science fiction. We own an imprint called Hard Case Crime, which is noir fiction. We've just published Stephen King's Later, which was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list for 4 weeks. That's the second book we've done with him. And then we've got Titan Comics. So we do a lot of licensed global comic books. We publish all the Doctor Who comic books around the world, all the Blade Runner comics. And we also do a lot of archive editions. We're currently doing archive editions of Michael Moorcock's Elric and Mel Nibonnet graphic novels from all the different places they were published in the first place, whether that was Marvel or whether it was First Comics or whatnot. And we're putting those into nice archive editions. And then there's Titan Merchandise, which is a kind of like, compared to my esteemed colleagues here, is kind of a compact and bijou merchandise business. And we primarily do some apparel lines for key licenses, and then vinyl collectibles and some high-end polystone statuary, but mainly vinyl collectibles. So we do the Titans proprietary vinyl line. We've done a lot of stuff with Doctor Who, a lot of stuff with Game of Thrones, Cartoon Network, that kind of thing.
Excellent. Sounds great. All right, Brian.
Well, my name is Brian Flynn. I am from Super 7, and I do not have a list anywhere near the length of Andrew's. I basically just make really nerdy stuff for nerdy other people.
You say you don't have a list, but if you really start talking about licenses, you guys have a wide spread of things.
Yeah, I'm trying to make as much stuff as I can before they figure out that I'm just a dork making toys and they run me out of the room. While I can, as long as they're going to let me, I'm going to make as much stuff as I can. I feel like I'm
that.
getting figured out any day.
Right. Would you consider that like imposter syndrome, or you just feel like everything's like a heist? You're just trying to get away with it?
No, I think it's just a very interesting sort of space where, it's more of the conversation for later, probably. Like, we never entered into this to become a larger toy company. We were making really obscure, weird stuff that we wanted to do that a very finite amount of people were interested in. And that has grown organically over time, but to the point now where all of a sudden you're in the same conversations and you're in the same meetings with a lot of much, much larger, well-established toy companies. And, most of those people went into business to become a toy company. And we
Right.
did not go into business. We were just making some stuff on the side. So it's a very interesting place to be in because, same thing. I keep waiting for people to be like, well, you don't get to do this anymore. So, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But yeah.
Well, and until they tell you to skedaddle, we're going to reap the benefits of that. So
exactly.
Could I just say, I love the dial down modesty of that response, because one primary difference, I think, between me and my esteemed colleagues here is that we own a retail store. So, you're vendors of ours, you're both vendors of ours, and we sell your stuff. So I know how good it is. And, that's just about the most modest way of saying we make a bunch of really awesome toys that I've ever heard, which I appreciate, but we sell a lot of Super 7 and it's amazing stuff.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. And obviously I've been to Forbidden Planet a bunch of times overseas. For the first time in London, I went there searching for old issues of Deadline because I was looking for all, I know there's Jamie Hewlett stuff I haven't seen out there. That was 20 years ago though.
That's epic stuff, mate. Yeah, great. Deadline's a classic.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's move to Jeremy now.
Yeah. All right. Listen, Forbidden Planet is a favorite of mine as well. I just want to throw that
cheers,
out
guys.
there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you deserve it. You deserve the intro. We'll defer to you at any time. Anytime. So yeah. So I'm Jeremy Padawar. I'm a partner at a company called Jazwares. We're the global partner for Pokemon, Fortnite, Roblox, Halo, Micro Machines, so on, AEW, and many others. But we've been growing like a weed. We acquired a company that created the brand Squishmallows, which turns out to be the number one plush business in the world right now, which is mind-numbing. And really the concept of catching a phenomenon is an impossibility. You can't create it, you can't predict it, you can't control it, and the best thing you can try to do is manage it for longevity. And if you can do that, then you've kind of got the special sauce, but that's a hard thing to do. We also signed on Cocomelon a few years ago, which was a special love of mine, and it's just been unbelievable from a preschool property perspective. So we're one of the larger toy companies now, pushing number 5, and happy to do so. I mean, that was never the objective. I mean, I know people say that all the time, but the truth is you go into this business just hoping to survive, and then hopefully you make good decisions along the way. It's easy to look backwards and to craft a statement that makes you sound like a genius. But the reality is you've probably just endured a lot more pain than others. And then you happen to have something that was meaningful along the way. And then you collect a few of those. And then all of a sudden, you have a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you get to choose what how others perceive it. But, from where I stand, I don't want to draw something that seems unparalleled or difficult to accomplish, because there's a whole new group of people that are going to be needing to take this over sooner than later, and they need to understand that it is achievable, especially in a world where you have things like direct-to-consumer and Amazon that are driving those possibilities.
Yeah, so that's to me it's interesting because when you think about the toys we played with as a kid, we never knew any of the people that made that stuff, and it felt like they were guys that went into business or engineering that just ended up at a toy company. And I feel like we're kind of the first generation of people that grew up and went, hey, this is something we can do. I can be involved in this, and actually finding ways to make stuff that we always wanted or get involved with licenses that we've always enjoyed. So I guess maybe to start at the early roots, what did you all want to be when you grew up?
Who wants to start? You want to start? We'll let Andrew start because he sounds much more regal when he speaks.
my family in Liverpool, England. Well, thank you for that description, mate. That's brilliant. It's very kind of you. I'll try and make this as quick as possible then. So what did I want to be when I grew up? Easy question. I wanted to be a secret agent, which is why I think to this day, I still dress like Patrick McGoon, the prisoner. I don't think I've ever got it out of my system. So I think I absolutely, that's what I wanted to be. And I would sit in the playground at school as I was reading my comic books and tell people that's what I wanted to do. And they laughed in my face, obviously. And then I realized that, okay, well, there's only three things in the world that I really sort of care about apart from my family. And that's like comic books and movies, TV and music. So I had to figure out some way to kind of do that. So ultimately, I was a movie journalist. I was a film critic for a music paper called The Enemy, which is like the Rolling Stone of the UK. Did that for a long time, as you know, Daniel, and I sort of became I presented like TV shows on TCM and whatnot. And I was like a career journalist and then a magazine publisher. I published a bunch of magazines in the UK that won't be that well known in the US, but published a magazine called Loaded, which was the magazine that inspired FHM. Published a magazine called Uncut, which is sold in the US, which is a music magazine, classic music and movie magazine. I did all of that for a long time. I ended up publishing a French film magazine called Cahiers Cinema, which is like Quentin Tarantino's favorite magazine. But I wasn't happy in Paris, and basically the owners of Titan, who I was a licensor for on classic comics, were looking for somebody to augment the boardroom. And so that's how I ended up working here. That was about 10 years ago. And so I never had a thought of making toys or producing them. And I would think compared to just about everybody else I touch in this part of the creative industry, of the pop culture industry, I own very few toys. I own 30,000 comic books. My whole time is spent reading. But what I share with everybody is a love of the IP. Yeah, the intellectual property is what really turns me on. And so, I've kind of absolutely gone into making toys via the back door because I'm not a designer. I'm a writer. I don't know anything about how you make stuff. Some people would tell you I don't know anything. I don't know how to distribute stuff either. I've ended up sort of making toys purely because I'm heavily involved with those licenses. The opportunities came up, and I wanted to do something good. That's the only thing I've ever been trying to do. I've failed miserably at that as much as I've succeeded, but I'm just trying to do something sort of good and interesting, if that makes sense. I guess that's the best way I can describe it.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that. Who's next? What do you want to be able to grow up, Jeremy?
For it?
Yeah, go.
No, we're gonna let Jeremy go.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I mean, listen, when I was a kid, I grew up in the deep South. And there wasn't a tremendous number of people to look to with varied careers. If you wanted to be successful, you would become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or something to that effect. But I mean, what I wanted is to be free-spirited, wealthy, and capitalistic in a way that didn't hurt other people. That's what I wanted. And that's about as truth serum as I can get. And as I got a little bit older, I recognized that there were people out there doing remarkable things, and they didn't necessarily come from big cities, and they didn't necessarily have very successful family lineages. And that was exciting to me. And when I was 16, 17 years old, I wrote 1,000 letters, 1,000. To celebrities and known people and powerful people around the world, and I only asked one question. And the question was, what do you consider as your greatest accomplishment? And the objective for me was, one, I loved the concept of corresponding with people who had succeeded, because I was still trying to define what that was. And I was shocked that of the 1,000 letters I received, like almost 150, 175 back from people like Mother Teresa and presidents and people who had done even, some horrific things, but they were very known. And I wanted to understand different things from them. Like, why would they decide to do something bad? And what did they learn from that? And basically my takeaway was that primarily these very, very successful, remarkable people found their family to be the most important thing in the world, and that they were doing things that they felt passionate about. So it was very freeing for me. So after high school and early college, I just recognized I would find my passion, and I did. And I recognized that I would, family would be first, and it is.
Jeremy, can I ask you a question, mate? Of all those responses that you got, which is the one that was the most meaningful to you?
Oh goodness. I got one from Fred Rogers that was handwritten. Brilliant. And while it for me, it was very meaningful because as a kid, I watched, Mr. Rogers constantly, as a little kid, especially because he would position things as if it were any neighborhood in the world, or at least any neighborhood that we would be identified as a neighborhood. And he would take you into achievable things. And so, I didn't know how spectacular he truly was until later on, you watch YouTube videos of him fighting for the rights of young kids.
The Congress video. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing.
And so I think at the time that I received it, I was like, oh, cool. I got a letter from Mr. Rogers. Yeah. But I think as an adult, after understanding his body of work and really what he stood for, it meant a lot more to me.
Yeah, that's brilliant, mate.
And Jeremy shared quite a few of these letters over the years on his social media stuff. So make sure he'll give a shout out at the end of social media, but follow him. And he sprinkles those in every so often. They're a delight to read.
Thank you.
All right, then for me, let's see. As a little kid, I thought I was going to be Luke Skywalker, and I was going to marry Princess Leia after the
good
first
gig.
Very good. I grew up, my dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot, but I was at an Air Force base in Germany, actually, when the movie came out. So I only ever saw Star Wars once until I was like 16 or 17 again. And so my entire, it's easy thing to come back later, as you said, come back later, build the backstory and sound smart. But my formative years, my entire interaction with those movies was simply through the toys. That was the only way I recreated it, because the comic book wasn't right and everything else. And I had a storybook, but my entire sort of love affair through Star Wars and my memories of it were all in plastic. They were not of watching the movie. They were not seeing it again. I didn't get to reabsorb it. I got to see it one time and that was it. Then actually Tron came out, and that one melted my mind at the same exact level. As a kid, not understanding the difference, but just looking at the Sid Mead costumes, the asymmetry of the tank and everything. It was just like, so design wise, that's where I got into it. And the guy's name was Flynn, so I was in. We were cool. But then from there, it was like I was always the art kid. I got into punk rock and skateboarding. I thought for a moment I might actually go pro as a skateboarder until I met somebody that actually went pro. And then I went, oh, you can be at 90%, but that last 10% you don't have. But we were also growing up in punk rock and skateboarding in the 80s. And it was everybody I knew was involved in this was really heavily passionate. And no one did anything for you because there was no industry, there was no expectation of revenue, there was no way to make money, so there's nobody to do it. So it's become a bit of a trope these days to talk about the whole DIY movement. But if you were serious and involved, like we put on every show, we booked every club, we made every flyer, we recorded every record, we pressed every record, we distributed every record. And the goal the entire time was never to make money. Not that money wasn't possible, but the goal was to be able to do the action, whether it was building a skateboard ramp in the backyard from stolen plywood or putting out a record. Everything that you did was predicated on the concept of break even, which is if it costs $500 to record and press this record and I can sell 133 records at $3, I got my $500 back. And if I get my $500 back, I can make another record and I can throw the other 67 records away. It doesn't matter. And what I see people always come back to is they go, I pressed 500, I only sold 133, I barely broke even, this was a waste. And for us, we were like, we got the record. I got 133 people to pay for it. How crazy is that? So I use that as the framework. So I ended up going to design school because I was drawing record covers and skateboard graphics. It turned into a design job. And then I was like, I want my own design studio, which then turned into my hobbies. And so I went back and I made a punk rock fanzine, but it was about Japanese monster toys because no one was talking about what I wanted to talk about. And I didn't expect anyone to care, but I could do digital pre-press. And it was the advent of digital photography. And now we had a magazine that looked slick, but was still predicated on, we have to sell, I think it was 8 ads at $250 and sell 500 copies at $5. And that mentality though has been the basis for Super 7 the entire time, which is, maybe some things will work, but maybe they won't. But let's just figure out what do we have to do to get our idea out into the world? That's the important part. Everything else we'll figure out later. And so that gave us a lot of time to just go out there and make all the weird stuff we wanted to do, where so many people are like, well, I'm not going to make that toy because I can't sell 10,000. I'm like, well, if I do a DTC, I only have to sell 500 of them. And then I get the toy for free. Or if you told me I could get it for $250 and I could have a run of them that I could give to 500 people, that would be worth my time. And so that, I think, led us into where we've gotten to, where we have sort of a different point of view. Obviously, it's turned into a real company. I'm responsible for people's lives and mortgages and stuff that's terrifying. But we're also out there doing weirder stuff because we're not trying to do it the same way. Like, I don't really care if Target wants to order it. Doesn't matter because I'm not selling it to them. So it changes the whole perception of how you run a business. So I guess I'm trying to weave it all the way back to like coming back to all those things that I loved. And that was, as a kid, my exposure to media was very slight, but when I had it, I lived for those toys. Like nothing will replicate the clear candy translucency of a Tomy 1980 Tron figure. Like that thing is perfect. It's perfect top to bottom. And so I'm trying to replicate that feeling now in the toys that I make.
So I've never met anyone that like only got to see Star Wars once. I mean, we're still of the generation that once it left the theaters, it didn't come on TV for, for another 4 or 5 years or something. So it was kind of gone, but I can't imagine seeing that and Tron, just like you only have the opportunity to see it once. And then the rest of it, you just have to recreate in your mind. That's so fascinating to me.
I think that's why the toys hold so much sway over kids of our generation.
Yeah.
Even into later generations. Yeah. That's what, you could theoretically come home in the 80s or 90s and watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for half an hour, but you only got half an hour. The next 3 hours were you and your toys. So the toys have sway because you spent far more emotional time with the toys than you did the actual content, where my kids can now watch any show that comes on that they get excited, watch the whole thing, binge watch it a second time, run through it a third time, and never need to digest that product ever again.
Yeah.
Like they're full and they don't ever need to deal with it. They don't care if there's a toy for it. They don't care if there's a game for it. They're done.
And that's fascinating.
I think that's very well observed. I think I think fundamental thing that's changed about society, and this totally is in line with what you just said, Brian, is that the concept of searching for things, whether that be informational artifacts that represent the things that you love, that's completely gone from society, because everybody lives with the world at their fingertips. So I used to collect a lot of books and comics. My kids who are adults don't collect anything, and the dad's a publisher, because it's just all there all the time. The answer to any question is there all the time. If you're interested in a particular character, whoever it may be, Batman, any question you've got about Batman can be answered within 30 seconds, 10 seconds, right? Yeah. And that was a fundamental part of the landscape when we were younger. And I guess I'm a bit older than you guys. Certainly when I was younger in the 60s, just finding the toys, let alone, getting hold of Jerry Anderson toys in the UK, you're getting hold of a Thunderbird 2 Dinky toy. That was the work of months rather than weeks. You had to find it first, then you had to have the money to buy it, And that's kind of glorious in its own way. That search, the quest, right? The quest is actually a very satisfying thing that people don't get to do now.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. Like I think I've shared this before with Jeremy being on a panel before, like finding your way into licenses that you want to be a part of, because there's sometimes, someone gets a master toy license, they kind of lock this thing down. They dictate what can or can't be made. And I think about like when Jeremy, when he was with Wicked Cool, like took the Easy Bake Oven and made it like a Ninja Turtle pizza oven. And I so specifically remember seeing that in Toys R Us going, that's how you get your foot in the door. Like that's how you find your way into a license. Like yeah. I thought that was so interesting. So
well, thank you. Listen, I think, and that goes to the strategy. I mean, the idea for us, because our objective was to be a mass-driven company that was able to reach beyond mass into specialty, but start with mass. So the secret sauce for us was to go after B-level categories with A-level licenses. And when you had things like Toys R Us, and incremental retail margin was important to them, meaning that if they averaged a 35-point retail margin across the board, but we could introduce something that's 45 points, and instead of being, the 13th most productive out of 13 items, if we're number 7, then we're offering them velocity, rate of sale, profitability, incremental margin, and all of the things that the big retailers wanted. So starting off as a B player with A category stuff was exactly right. I mean, you kind of nailed it. That was our original plan. And then you either trip and find yourself on top of an A-level property, or you execute so well that licensors identify you as worthy of taking a risk on, and retail finds you interesting. Toys R Us going away is challenging for newer companies that are looking to get a bigger footprint, because Toys R Us was the toy store. They had 40,000 square feet. Maybe they only needed 20, but they had 40. And with that 40, they had to look for opportunities to fill things up. So, today it's a different story for us. We're not the underdog anymore. We are the A-level master toy company. But in order to get there, we had to take those steps. And the Turtles oven was a great example of that. I mean, it was out there, and really Toys R Us gave us a shot with that item, and it was moderately successful. I mean, but those were the steps to take in order to try to get the bigger footprint.
Yeah. So again, we've seen such a tremendous shift in the industry, the past couple of years. Toys R Us going away, Target and Walmart trying to kind of find what that means to them. They've started these sort of collector sections that have been, some are more successful than others, and trying to determine what goes in which area. And we've seen a bit of like diamond breaking up a little bit, some people taking their ball and leaving, what was kind of a monopoly for a while. So trying to find those places, and then I think, like Brian sort of mentioned earlier, the direct consumer thing is possible, but then you're kind of starting a whole new division. It's a lot more legwork, and you got some stuff going one place and stuff going another place. So how do you guys kind of juggle just that ever-changing thing of where you can get your stuff into? How do you get it in front of people?
At least for us, obviously, it's a constant conversation. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, you're hot, I want your stuff. But if like it's my job to curate that stuff. If it doesn't make sense to go into your store, then why should I sell it to you? And a lot of those people have their own marching rules. They have their own like Jeremy would say, they have their margin requirements. They have this, they have that. That doesn't mean that it's healthy for me. We're in a unique spot that we can go into those conversations and just say no, because our business isn't predicated on that, because our size isn't predicated on that. Bigger play, the bigger you are, the more you have to feed. You have to find, the food. So we're still in a state where we don't have to do that the same way. But it's tricky because, between Target and Walmart, those are the two places where 95% of the people that collect toys go to look first. And if it's not at Target or not at Walmart, half the time it doesn't even exist. But working within their matrix can be incredibly beneficial, but it can also be incredibly destructive. And there's a lot of risks that go with it. You have to bend to their formula, not have them bend to your formula.
Okay.
So, and then you can come down a level into your midterms where people talk about FYE, you talk about Barnes and Noble, you talk about Borders, well, not Borders, but you talk about Hot Topic or any of those other places. But even then, it's a very, what one needs from the other is very varied, and they're very regional, except for Hot Topic. So I would say, I think it's when you make up your mind that you're really, it seems like for us, when you really decide you're going to go mass, you really have to change how you script your business, because it's scripted based on how they do business, not on how you do business. And I think that's been sort of the tricky part, because as a collector, anybody listening to this would be like, well, if they would just put this on the shelf, it would totally sell. But it's like, okay, well, that peg represents between 2,000 doors, that peg represents $6 million in sales for the year. And they only set it twice a year. So are you telling me that that's going to sell $3 million? Yeah, maybe not. So it's a very different beast when you scale to that thing. And that's, like we said, that was the wonderful thing about Toys R Us, was they had a pretty large footprint, but they also had a wide enough room. Like, I mean, you can go to Target, their action figure aisle is one aisle, two-sided, plus then sort of a junior's action figure aisle next to it. So there's only so many pegs.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all the space there is. And if you're not selling to those two people, then you've got to be in a completely different business. And those things are radically different. And that's obviously something we're obviously talking about on a regular basis on our side. But it's also sort of a fight that we're not willing to have at this point, because, yeah, I don't know, because I'm not willing to concede certain things yet.
Okay, fair enough.
I think that answer very closely reflects the one that I would have given, and can't really add anything to it other than the fact that, as I say, we're a small kind of BG collectibles company. Our main focus is publications, and that's our mass market game, is books and comics. Yeah. And so making collectibles for us is about putting collectibles in the places that we want to put them, and making it kind of making it very focused. I had a really interesting, for me, certainly as an Englishman who spends a massive amount of time in America normally, but is nonetheless English. So I didn't really grow up with Toys R Us, like mall culture, any of that kind of stuff. But when we first started selling collectibles, and we originally got some support from Toys R Us, and I went to the head offices, in New Jersey, in Wayne, right? I knew the jig was up the minute I went to visit them, because when I went to their offices, having never been in the heyday, it was like going to a meeting at Goldfinger's munitions factory, but Goldfinger and all of his staff are off, and there's just 5 people left in a building the size of a football stadium carrying on meetings like that's normal. And I was like, this is really creepy. It's like an episode of The Twilight Zone. Like I was Earl Holliman, you know, waking up suddenly and all the people had gone. Where have all the people gone? And I thought, this is the whole landscape of the way this is going to work is going to change over the next couple of years, which is absolutely, as Brian was saying, it is kind of what has happened. So I think when you're the size that we are within the collectible space, you have to be very, very careful about who you're working with and who you're selling to. And I'm very cautious about working with mass for our collectibles for exactly that reason. You never want to be on the hook for the wrong side of one of those conversations.
Interesting.
So what can I say? I'm on the other side of it.
You're on a different place,
Yeah,
mate.
that's what we love. The point counterpoint.
So no, listen, there is no point and counterpoint, because I can relate. I understand. It just depends on what your objectives are. And we started off with the objective of being a mass-oriented company that had product that would cross over. And there's nothing good or bad or indifferent about it. It's just, you know, the objective is to build product that you can be very proud of and bring content in that you can be proud of and serve the greater community. I think we've walked that line and done it. It is very, very expensive and painful to fail. But if you get a couple wins under your belt, you know, you can, you know, failure at that level is achievable. Because the one thing that's certain in our business is failure. I mean, you're going to swing the bat and you're going to miss most of the time. And hopefully, you know, you're just continuing to be prolific about the shots that you're taking. I think that, you know, when you're focusing on mass or direct or whatever it may be, you know, the best thing that you can do is, even for your employees, is to stay lean. Because I think under those circumstances, that break even can be lower, that you can be very, very soulful under those circumstances and very pure. It's just at some point in time, a lot of folks find themselves stepping over a line that they didn't know that they already stepped over. Huh. And we're definitively so far over that line that we just know exactly what we are and what we're doing. It's when you are sort of that lobster in the pot and you don't realize that the temperature is already 250 degrees. And that's what I would, you know, that's my biggest comment, I think, to anyone that's playing the game, is that most people don't know where they are in the water.
Yeah. And, you know, and obviously in me describing my situation, I'm not trying to parallel against what Jeremy and Jazwares are doing. Like, you know, I'll use an example, like with AEW, like that customer base lives at Walmart. Like that is where they go to shop. They also shop at Target and other places. But like, if you're going to make wrestling figures and you're not selling it to Walmart, well, you're never going to be really making wrestling figures in the general term.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being in those places, but you've got to have an organization that's built to support those places. And if you build an organization coming from a different place, switching that organization to an organization that can support those things is very, very difficult.
And it's, you know, it's interesting you bring wrestling figures up as a topic, because I do agree. And I'm a big fan of wrestling figures, and I'm a big fan of companies that are trying it and putting themselves out there and doing it. And yet I still sort of like cringe because I don't want them to fail. And I think that I see like a half a dozen companies right now doing it. And the hope is that people just figure out a way to do lean manufacturing. They do good deals with talent where they don't, you know, put themselves out there. And, but because it's such a niche, and it's such one where people have so much passion that you want consumers to get the breadth that they're looking for. It's an awesome sub market within the action figure universe.
Totally. So I feel like, if we were having this conversation any other time, I wouldn't have to bring this up, but we have just been through, 15 months of unprecedented, time that will live in history books. And you gentlemen, as the heads of companies, have had to make decisions about things and navigate things that people from in your line of work have never had to before. From how does your company work when everyone's at home? How do you get things made when everyone in China and Hong Kong left, and maybe they're coming back and maybe they're not, and maybe their government's letting them back in, and some factories are stealing people from other factories, in order just to ramp up production. There's a shipping container shortage now. I mean, there's this laundry list of things that come with manufacturing right now that you guys are kind of making up these new rules. And when do you bring your employees back safely, and do you do that, and how does that look? And you guys kind of talk about what you faced and what are facing and navigating right now, because it's way different than any other time in history to do what you guys do.
It was hilarious only because we came back from Toy Fair February 2020 to going like, okay, here's all the plans for the year. This is all that we lined up. It was amazing. And within 2 weeks, it was like, all those plans are scrapped, and then we're going to go lock down, and how long will it last? I mean, the longer tail end of that, I don't think any of us can answer specifically. I think the revelation has been that you can work anywhere and get your job done in most cases. Right now, I would say half the people that work for me now don't even live here anymore. Some of them moved away because San Francisco is expensive, or they had family that they could go live nearby or wanted to be, or we hired people from elsewhere. I think that's going to change the playing field. I don't know that it made things more difficult. Like, I can't go to the factory the way I like to go to the factory. I like to sit down at the factory and go through things and like, okay, let's move this paint a little bit. Let's move this paint a little bit. And they can go upstairs, repaint it, bring it back down. It takes half an hour versus repaint it, take a photograph of it, send it across. Does it look right? Those things taking weeks to get into the details of. The shipping container thing is the single most annoying part of it all, because it's like, my stuff is done.
Yeah.
But it's not, and you have a formula for your business where it's like, I know when at X factories in 21 to 28 days, it'll be in my warehouse and I can get it out. And now it's like, it might be 75 days. Don't know. And then that throws off cash flow. That throws off everything you can imagine. Or, somebody in Europe airships their stuff in and it's out 60 days before anybody else gets their stuff. And then all your fans are going crazy because these guys in Europe already got that stuff. And why did I bother ordering it from you if I'm not going to get it for another month?
Yeah.
It's frustrations, but they're all annoyances. Like, we're still getting to do what we do. People are still supportive. So I think COVID's an interesting thing. I don't know if it's changed the industry per se. I think it's just changed how people work.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, I think I trusted people before. I trust them even more now. And I think I trust everyone except for rental car companies. That's been the takeaway. Everything's gone back. You look at rental cars; they're $200 a day for a Ford, like an entry level vehicle, which is shocking. They used to be $17. But in all seriousness, it's affected things pretty dramatically. I mean, I think that going back, I think you have to treat illness and wellness differently than ever before. So as we go back into the office, we'll make certain that, you know, being sick doesn't necessarily mean you take a sick day. Maybe it just means you have a 99.5 fever and we don't want to see you. Work from home because we know you can. You've demonstrated it. I think that also allows us to do a lot more in terms of people's individual freedom. But like I told you, my whole objective in my own career was to be free-spirited. So applying that to others has been a little bit more difficult in the framework of trying to be a very big company. But in the more macro level framework of the world proved that it can work remotely, that does allow for that. And you see, you know, mega companies that are trillion-dollar market cap companies that are working primarily from home. I think the one thing that concerns me, and it's not necessarily related to our business as much as it's just related to growth of individuals, is that, you know, the being in proximity to other people and being able to communicate and being able to be in the moment and present allowed me to be maybe more successful earlier in my career as a result. I was able to communicate well. I was able to do things relatively apolitically. I don't know what that means in the world where people are working from home and they don't have the opportunity to show their stuff as much. That does concern me. But we are, you know, we're in the process of heading back now. We just opened our LA offices after 15 and a half months. People seem, you know, pretty good. We're going back 50%. Florida offices have been open. Hong Kong are still closed. Philly, like if you go across our offices, every one of them has sort of a different comeback. But yeah, I don't think we've seen the end of this yet. This is gonna continue for a while, and those you know, containers. I see the containers much like the rental car business right now. It's a blip, it's a shocker, but it won't be long, and things will be back to more normalcy.
Good.
I think the whole thing has been kind of an object lesson and a reminder about human resilience and adaptability, right? That's the upside of this whole thing. I think personally, I think that the shipping situation, which is a bit of a catastrophe, is a kind of a metaphor for society in general. The reality is we don't know where this thing is going, and we don't know when it's going to end, and it keeps on evolving. You know, and I've got a lot of friends who work in public health, and their take on it is everybody's been very lucky that the pandemic we've had to deal with has relatively such a low fatality rate. I know millions of people have died, and that's an absolute tragedy. But what I mean is versus what it might have been, if it had a 90% fatality rate, we'd be looking at a completely different globe at this moment in time. So having had this object lesson where everybody's really adapted quickly to working at home and to personal mobility, I think that's been a very positive thing. And you know, you really just have to walk into every day. Every day is like Wednesday in the Mickey Mouse Club, anything can happen day now. Every day is anything can happen day. And I think you just got to expect it and almost welcome it and deal with it. If I had a concern for my staff and for, you know, human beings in general and younger humans particularly, you know, every study you ever read or look at indicates that human happiness and human growth is tied directly to social contact. And while this is awesome, this is fantastic, and it's something society wouldn't have been able to do 10, 15 years ago. Right. It does not replace hanging out with people in the flesh, you know, and the reality is there's a lot of like human warmth at the end of it. One of the things, many of the things the points you've touched, Jeremy, is your stance about societal responsibility and you know, trying to succeed and do the right thing at the same time. You know, we have a duty of care to our fellow human beings, and we should be trying to exist in a way that, you know, everyone can grow and develop throughout the course of a human life, whether that's my kids, your kids, anybody else's kids. And I guess my big concern is trying to plot a way through that. I think companies are always going to be okay. I think we've got to keep a weather eye on human beings and things like Comic Cons can't happen at the moment. If you're a kid living in, I don't know where, Alaska, and you're surrounded by people who like drinking heavily and like, sports, and that's it, but you love comic books, your twice-a-year trips to like San Diego and New York Comic Con, that's your temple.
Yeah.
Getting to hang out with your people, that's a very important thing. But it's the same for people into sports and going to football matches or baseball or soccer. Same thing. Theatre, cinema, everything. Concerts. So being able to do that stuff is very important for our social growth and social preservation. That's, I would say, my main concern, rather whether our companies will keep on rolling, because our companies will keep on rolling. You'll always find a way to adapt.
Yeah, I can say that is, when I moved to San Francisco, left Portland, started the design studio. I mean, the first 2.5 years we worked out of the house. And by the time it was 2.5 years in, you were like, if I don't get an office, I'm going to kill people. I have to leave. I have to talk to other people.
Yeah.
You got to go outside and do more than go to the corner store and get something to drink or something. And it's like, there's going to be a reckoning, not a reckoning, that makes it sound more dire, but a certain thing where it's like working from home has worked great the last 15, 18 months. But there's a point where you're like, okay, now I need separation between work and home. And I need to be able to put this off to the side and not answer an email at 10 p.m.
Right.
And that kind of stuff. That will come back around. That's still a little ways off for a lot of people. But yeah, as far as the industry selling toys, that's the fun part of it. It really doesn't, there's a very, very different scales of human achievement in life, or I'm failing to find the right words, but it's like whether or not I get to make another set of Silverhawks is far less important than like the sort of bigger things that we're leaning into right now.
But speaking of that, the last question I have for you guys was a phrase I heard earlier in this conversation, managing for longevity. When you look at licenses and stuff, fans are not patient. They've all got their favorites. They want all their favorite characters in the first wave, and if they're not, it's just like, and I've seen this, I've been writing about toys for the past 20 years, and it's the same thing over and over again. It seems no one learns the lesson of, you got to kind of spread things out a little bit. You got to, put some guys further out so that it keeps going and stuff. Can you kind of talk about how you manage for longevity in the lines and licenses that you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So I think, Daniel, your understanding of the business is unparalleled. I'll just throw that out there. You always ask really insightful questions, and I'm not sure if I mean that with an SIGHT or a CITE, but you do. For us, it's managing for longevity means that you cover the breadth of a line by creating rarity where you don't necessarily otherwise have demand. So if you have an A, B, and C level group of characters, if you can give someone a economic reason to want C, like they go out and but we never, that's the thing about mass, we never charge for it. We never fleece people. But we'll go out there and we'll short pack something that otherwise doesn't have huge demand, so that we can create demand amongst the lesser desired or lower ranked by consumers characters. So you can create that balance of desire across a line by doing that. So the A-level characters, it's also a balance, because the temptation is to maximize your business right off the bat and put a bunch of them together. But it's not really about putting a consumer in a situation where they have to wait and wait and wait for something. It's about, if you don't do that, you might have a scenario where the longevity of the business and the ability to get to the breadth of the characters is greatly limited by your fulfilling desire immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of fun to do that, and sometimes it's a lot of angst. But regardless, your question is insightful in every way.
Thank you.
We're all trying to be polite to see who goes next.
After you, Brian.
It's an interesting thing. Obviously, the dictates are slightly different in where I'm selling the majority of my product versus where Jeremy's selling his. So like when we do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Reaction and Target did bring it in, they did exactly that. They brought the 4 turtles and no one else, because their metric is, units per peg per day. They don't care who it is. So I only want the thing that's going to guarantee me my metric. So they're not willing to buy, people that are further down the list, or at least not in the beginning. For us, I definitely, when we plan our lines out, what you're coming to me for as a company in general is like, you don't need necessarily, if you use turtles again, another Donatello or Michelangelo. You can get those from everybody. You want blue glow in the dark Baxter Stockman, or you want that deeper cut. That's what I provide. So when we line plan out, I specifically line plan out of like, we're not going to give you all the big guns all at once. Like when the first 4 wave of ultimates for turtles was, you only got 1 turtle per wave. But the collector that knows us knows that, well, that means I know they're in for at least 4 waves. So I'm going to get into the weeds. We go back to, Reaction for Masters of the Universe. We did 92 different figures.
Wow.
For Masters of the Universe. Now, some of those are repaints based on, Skeletor from India or whatever. But, that collector is there. That collector is just not there in the same numbers as the collector that wants just He-Man and Skeletor. And as long as you recognize that and you can manage it, and that's what you're manufacturing to, then it's fine. I think people have this expectation that Target or Walmart should be supporting the very, very, very obscure characters, but that's not their business, quite honestly. So expecting that to happen, it's not really the same thing. It's like expecting to see the relief, your favorite 3rd string relief pitcher in every game of baseball. Like I've got a better guy, and that guy's playing. So, So I think it's just different based on who you're selling to and how you're selling and the makeup of what you're doing. But there's always a customer. The question is, most of those customers are not realistic about how many of them they really are, because they're like, me and 100 dudes on Facebook have a group and we would all buy this and everyone knows it. And it's like, yeah, but 100 dudes doesn't even get me to an output. And their version of that is it's thousands of people.
Yeah.
It's usually a much, much narrower group of people than
the vocal minority.
It's a passionate minority.
Yes.
I agree so hard with that. I think I have had specifically that experience with a whole bunch of Doctor Who fans over the years, because I think we've done a wider variety of Doctor Who collectibles than anybody else. 15 waves of them, and it's exactly that deal. The amount of pressure you get from the invested few in, you've really got to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, man, I would love to do it. I've designed, look, it's right here. I've designed it. I just, you and your mates aren't going to swing that order though. And I think you have to be, we're certainly very mindful with our wave planning. And it's exactly what Brian said. I think, you've got to be careful not to shoot your bolt too soon. And certainly for me, I'm a huge Cartoon Network fan. Classic Cartoon Network, and we've done a whole ton of Cartoon Network stuff, but we held off on doing like Powerpuff Girls, one of my absolute favorite shows, till like the 4th wave. Well, holding off on that for like what turned out to be 4 years kind of killed me, because I love that show, and I love that. I think Craig McCracken's a genius, and And so it, you know, when it's stuff that you personally love, I think it's difficult, but you have to do it, because if you've got a wave that's got Johnny Bravo in it and Dexter and the Powerpuff Girls, it's all in there, you know, it's going to be so difficult to come back. And I think the other interesting thing in the climate we're in now is that intellectual property churn is going at a greater rate of knots than I've ever seen it in my entire pop culture life. We're back in that world of instant global communication and the world at your fingertips again. And so because there's a huge machine that has recognized the value of pop culture, you know, I used to be physically threatened for, you know, reading Batman comics on match day, going into Liverpool when the soccer was on, you know, because everybody was going to the match. And I would be threatened for doing something at the age of 14 as childish as reading the Batman book. But now, of course, the thing that's as big as sport globally is popular culture, you know. So now everybody loves Marvel movies. Now you know, everybody's going to the match, reading comic books, right? You know, but what gets made and adapted, you know, Jupiter's Legacy comes out like 4 weeks ago on Netflix, a massive amount of spend. Mark Miller's a really good mate of mine. It's already cancelled, you know, 3 weeks after it launched, you know. So keeping I think what I think is particularly tricky, what I like about your model, Brian, is with those classic IPs that you often go to, is trying to predict what's actually going to work on the new stuff. That is very, very tricky indeed. And then sometimes you have something that works brilliantly. I can think of one major fantasy show in the last 5 years, the biggest fantasy show in a long time, that sold just tons of product. You know, it was literally flying out the door until it ended on a final episode in the final season that nobody liked. And it literally just turned it off overnight on a force. Everybody knows the show I'm talking about. It's just like bang. And wow. You go from selling tons of stuff to nothing the next day. It's like, wow, holy that's something else. So we're living in the great unknown these days, I think.
Yeah, and I think that in general, if you're talking about collectibles or toys or whatever, this is clearly, as much as we'd like to think about it in the old days, this is clearly the golden age of action figures. There's never been as many toys of as many licenses as deep it is now than ever in the history of toys. Like, it's bonkers. If you want a toy of anything, just about, you can get it. Yeah. They're making The Prisoner for you right now.
That's right. Yeah. I was about to say.
I know you are, mate. Yeah.
It's not me.
No, there's a Kickstarter.
No, I know. Yeah, it's the Kickstarter for those dudes.
Yeah.
I interviewed those lads about 2 weeks ago, actually. So, you know, I've tried to do Prisoner. Believe me, I've tried to do Prisoner collectibles, and I've walked away from it. You know, and there's no bigger fan than me. So, you know, for those lads to be doing that, I think is beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's just very interesting that right now, like if you collect turtles, you can get it in 3-inch, 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, 9-inch, 12-inch. Do you want it at this price point, this level of art? You can get anything you want. If you collect Batman, my God, your life is ruined. Like there's a Batman in every size, scale, price point, color, and era at any given moment. There's got to be 1,000 Batmans coming out this year, you know, between everything. And it is truly the thing where it's like anything and everything's being made, and it's really unprecedented, and the quality across the board is unprecedented.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember seeing, this is about 15, 16 years ago, going into a store in the States and finding the Batman animated adventures version of the Creeper. Right. And I'm a massive Steve Ditko fan. And it was like, I just cannot believe that there it is. They've actually made the Creeper. Anything's possible now. And now there's like, you can get about 10 versions of the Creeper. You can get Blue Beetle, you can get everybody. It's unbelievable. But I remember being a kid in a primary school in Liverpool where my prized possession, my Thunderbird 2 was stolen. And I was never able to replace it because I couldn't find it again. Oh, wow. I mean, now you can find them all over the place. I did find out the name of the guy who stole it, though, several years later. So, Mark Roberts, if I ever find you, you've got to give it me back or you'll be in a lot of trouble, mate. That's what I'm saying.
I love it. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. You know, these things always go way too fast. I've got 30 more questions that I didn't get to, but the more enjoyable thing for me is just the conversation, just seeing how you guys interact and play off each other. It's why I do this year after year. I just love I've always been interested in how the sausage gets made. And just thank you so much for your time, your insight. Thank you for your blood, sweat, and tears that you put into your product, how you manage your people, and just how you navigate things. I as a collector and someone that has done this the same sort of thing myself, I really do appreciate what it takes to do what you do, and for you also to give up your time to talk about it. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Daniel. I still don't feel like I'm supposed to be in the club. So.
You absolutely
Thanks,
are.
Daniel. Thank you very much. You are you like I said, you're one of the most knowledgeable people in the business, and you position yourself as the it's like your Kaiser Sose. I think at the end of the episode, you find out the guy that was limping back to the car was the genius. But no, we appreciate being a part of it, and everyone here recognizes your extreme knowledge and know-how.
Thank you.
Yeah,
20 years,
absolutely
Daniel.
right. Such a 20, I mean, it's amazing. Such a pleasure to be asked, mate. Do you know what I mean? If I had one request, I would just wish that you go back to your pseudonym, because I always thought Julius Marx was inspired personally. That was brilliant.
There's still people that call me Julius Marx. And my pseudonym was born purely out of my AOL screen name, because I was a giant Groucho Marx fan, and I was trying to find, I didn't want to be Groucho 90210 or whatever, so Julius was his real name. So I started going by Julius Marx, and back at the early days of the internet, it's like, well, I don't want to use my real name because people will come murder me or something. So there are still people when I go to conventions that'll go, oh, Julius. So yeah, it's a
line I've been saying for years is, it's the Groucho line about, I'd never want to join a club that would have me as a member.
Have me as a member.
Actually being part of this club is a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed talking to all of you guys. Such a pleasure to meet you. And I wholeheartedly agree with what Jeremy said about your knowledge and ability, which Daniel is certainly far greater than mine is. So thanks again for talking about imposter syndrome. That's absolutely what I've had during the course of this hour, but I've really enjoyed it.
Not at all. So let's quickly give kind of a shout out, let people know where they can find you and where they can find your product and that sort of thing on social media or your website or your retail stores, because you guys have got all that. So we'll start again with Andrew over here.
Okay, so real quick, our retail chain is forbiddenplanet.com. We ship globally, so come and check us out there. You can check us out at Forbidden Planet on Twitter, on Instagram. We're on Facebook. I'm at Sumner, SUMNARR, which I got from Thundar the Barbarian, because somebody had already done Sumner on Twitter. Check out Forbidden Planet TV on YouTube, and that's where you'll see me talking to a bunch of our creators and whatnot. And also check out my Hard Degree podcast on Apple, which is me talking to business people, creators, whatever. So that's about all of it, mate. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to add that to my playlist. All right, we'll go with you, Brian.
Obviously, super7.com is the easiest place to find all your, all the fun stuff that we make. Social media wise, it's usually just at Super7. You can find me at Brian Flynn. It's a very fancy scream name right there, And then if you're ever in San Francisco or San Diego, please stop by the physical store, because there's nothing like walking into a toy store and talking to the staff in there about all the stuff that they like.
Amen.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah, so you can find us at Jazwares, anywhere, JAZWARES. You can find me on Instagram at Jeremy Padawar or on Twitter at JeremyCom.
And absolutely follow him on Twitter, because he gives people stuff all the time. You put on he's always asking, like, what are you looking for on eBay? You put in a link and he just randomly chooses people and he buys you stuff off eBay. So highly recommend.
Oh man.
Or maybe I shouldn't tell people that.
No, I don't mind.
That decreases my chances of me getting something.
Here's the thing. COVID was just so disruptive to people. I knew that I had a job, and I just wanted to do stuff. And so that's what it was all about. But you know, it's all good, man. We're all one big family. If we've ever needed to know that, we were reminded it because we all experienced the same thing, all floating on this rock.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well, again, thank you, gentlemen, so much. Hopefully next year we'll do this in person at Comic-Con.
Oh man, I certainly hope so. I can't wait. Can't wait to get back to San Diego. I love it.
Comic-Con, it's definitely those thing where it's like you see all those people once a year, a lot of those people. And it's like, I've seen you every year for 20 years. So I'm ready for it to be back as well.